from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
I'm getting the vaccine so my kids can eventually come to school without wearing a mask and just be normal kids.
So we can pack the dining room. That's why I'm getting the vaccine.
I got the vaccine for one reason, so I can hug my grandkids again. So come on, Nebraska. Let's finish strong.
Let's finish strong, Nebraska.
Finish strong, Nebraska.
Learn more and find out when it's your turn to get the COVID-19 vaccine.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, ramped up vaccination efforts. We have two guests joining us via Zoom today. Sarah Morgan will join us a little bit later. Sarah is an administrator with the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services Division of Public Health. In the meantime, I'd like to welcome Dr. Mark Rupp. Dr. Rupp is a professor and chief in the Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Kathy, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
You bet. Hey, before we talk about efforts, let's talk about the vaccines themselves, starting with the possibility of a fourth. What can you tell us about AstraZeneca?
Well, AstraZeneca vaccine is the fourth one that looks like it's positioning itself for full FDA review and potentially an emergency use authorization. This vaccine is very much like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine with regard to the strategy for vaccination. You know, some of your viewers may have seen they've had a few little stumbles in their development with regard to some of the study logistics and things. Just this week, they released a little bit of information, perhaps prematurely, and then had to walk back just a little bit that maybe the efficacy was a percentage point or two less rosy than what they had submitted. But, you know, it looks like from what we understand right now, this may be the fourth vaccine to cross the finish line. You know, back with Project Warp Speed, I think our approach was to bet on a bunch of horses in the race with hopes that we might get one or two of them across the finish line. It looks like right now we're in the trifecta where we've had a winner and a place and a show, and maybe we'll get the fourth place finisher as well.
Let's talk about that winner, place, and show. There are three vaccines that are currently in use, and we're going to put those up for our viewers. Doctor, walk us through these three. Tell us about them. What's important to know?
Well, the two at the top of the list are what we call mRNA vaccines. This is known as the Pfizer vaccine for the manufacturer, or the Moderna vaccine, which is the same thing. These are using a relatively new technology for vaccination. I mean, we've been working on this technology for many years, but this is the first time that we've had an authorized use of these vaccines in human beings. The nice thing about them is that we can make them fairly quickly, and that's been demonstrated because these are the first two that are across the finish line and are in broad use now within the United States, with, you know, tens of millions of doses having been administered. They appear to be very effective, 95% at preventing clinical disease, almost universally preventing severe illness and hospitalization and death, and you know, very, very safe. So we're really, really pleased with these. They you know, have a little bit of a different way of approaching vaccination as far as the technology, but are working terrifically well. And then the third one that you have there is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It likewise uses a little bit of an innovative approach to vaccination. So it's using a virus as a vector to deliver some of the viral DNA to the cells. The cells then respond by making spike protein, very much like when we're using the mRNA vaccine. So your cells make a little bit of spike protein, which is a crucial component that the virus uses when it actually causes an infection. Now, because your body sees the spike protein, it makes antibody directed against the spike protein, and also has the interaction with the memory cells, so that hopefully your body has long-lasting immunity. If it ever encounters this virus for real, it will be fully armed, primed, ready to respond, and will ward off the infection.
Okay, people signing up to get the vaccine, and they look at those three options, Johnson & Johnson, a one and done. The other two, it takes a couple of shots. Beyond that, Dr. Rupp, when folks are logging on for this, what's important to know? Does it really matter at the end of the day which of the three, or are all of them okay for everyone?
Well, as you've pointed out, there are a little bit of subtle differences between the vaccines. The Pfizer and Moderna is a 2-shot regimen, followed 3 or 4 weeks from the first priming shot to the booster shot. The Johnson & Johnson, as you related, very commonly known as the one-and-done vaccine, it just needs 1 shot. The J&J vaccine also has the advantage of not requiring the really ultra-low temperatures that the mRNA vaccines require. So it's a little bit hardier, and we can ship it out and will probably be very, very valuable in other lesser developed countries where they may not be able to maintain that cold chain. But at the end of the day, all of these vaccines work tremendously well. And what I've been fond of saying is they keep you out of the hospital and they keep you out of the graveyard. And that's really what we're looking for. There are, perhaps a little bit of subtle differences with regard to the efficacy, but they're very comparable. The studies weren't done head-to-head, so you don't have any data comparing one vaccine directly with another one. So trying to cross from one study to another is a little bit difficult. The bottom line is that they all work really, really well. I strongly urge anybody, if they have this vaccine become available to them, they take advantage of that and protect themselves against the real risks of COVID-19 infection. The real possibility of getting a severe infection, ending up in the hospital, or even dying from the infection. Or what we're seeing all too frequently are younger, healthier people who have relatively mild acute infections, but then go on to get some of the chronic ailments, the fatigue, the malaise, the aches, the low-grade fevers, what a lot of people are calling brain fog. And some of these symptoms can last, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. We don't know how long because we just haven't had that longitudinal experience. But all these things can be avoided by vaccination.
Okay, and all three, of course, involve needles. For anybody who's watching today, who's thinking, I know how important this is, he's making his case, I want to get this done, but they have a real fear of needles. What would you tell them?
Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat the getting of the vaccine. They do involve an inoculation, so it does cause some momentary discomfort with getting the shot. It's very minimal. I can personally attest. I went through a 2-shot regimen. Both times I barely felt the initial inoculation. With any of these shots, most people will get a sore arm. With the mRNA vaccine, it's probably 80% or so will have a sore arm. It can be pretty noticeable. And a sizable minority of people, I would say, maybe 40% or so, will likely have some other side effect from the vaccine process. Now, sometimes this is pretty mild, a little bit of fatigue, maybe a mild headache. Sometimes it's a little bit more bothersome. But in almost all instances, it's very self-limited, goes away in a day or two, can be very much minimized by taking a little bit of Motrin or some Tylenol. And again, when you compare the minimal side effect profile from the vaccine to the real risk of having severe infection or even death from the infection, the benefit cost ratio clearly favors getting that vaccine.
Okay, can I ask, has anybody gotten COVID after being fully vaccinated?
No vaccine is perfect, and these vaccines are not perfect in their protective effect either. So again, the data suggests that, again, the mRNA vaccines with the study showing about a 95% efficacy in preventing any sort of a symptomatic infection. The J&J data is a little bit lower than that, but again, was done under different conditions. So again, I think is fairly comparable. But again, some people will get sick despite the fact that they've been vaccinated. But the data really, really strongly indicates that even if you get sick, your infection is not going to land you in the hospital. It's not going to land you in the graveyard. And there's also some data to suggest that if you do get sick, that your viral load, how much virus you're shedding, is very much decreased. So you're probably less able to transmit that to anybody else. So all of these things, again, very, very heavily weigh in favor of getting the vaccine. we're getting more and more data with regard to that last part that I mentioned as far as being able to transmit the virus. So we were concerned initially that we didn't have much data on whether you could get the vaccine and then still get an infection and whether you could be asymptomatically shedding the virus. Now, we don't have a complete end of the story on that, but the ongoing accruing evidence suggests that the vaccine also protects against asymptomatic acquisition and shedding of the virus. So there's a number of lines of evidence. I don't think we need to go into all the details, but I fully expect that in the short-term future, we'll get additional data and be able to say very, very firmly that, yes, this prevents transmission. And when we have that information, we're going to feel a whole lot more secure in giving people really firm advice on whether they need to wear a mask after they've been vaccinated and things like that. For the time being, it's probably best that we do continue many of those precautions, particularly when folks are out in public and in group settings and that kind of thing. But in the relatively near future, this is how we get our society back. We get people vaccinated and we're able to start to enjoy those interactions that we all crave so much.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes remaining. What is the life expectancy of these vaccines?
Another great question that we don't have all the data on. I'm really hopeful that these will give people very long-lasting immunity, meaning that months and months, maybe even years, but we just don't have the experience to know that. The more data we get, the longer that period looks, and so right now we've got data out to about 6 months. Looks like it's very protective out that far. So I'm hopeful that people will not need to be getting frequent boosters for this, but we really just don't know that information at this point.
Okay, we've got 1 minute remaining, Dr. Rupp. What, in your opinion, is the most important thing that our viewers need to know at this time during the pandemic?
That all these vaccines are tremendously effective, that any of them that become available to an individual person, that individual should step up and take advantage of that opportunity. These vaccines are very effective. They will prevent disease. They'll prevent you from going into the hospital or potentially dying from this. They protect your family because you won't be transmitting this virus to the people that you love. Likewise, with the community, it protects everybody around us. We all need to do our part. And at this crucial juncture, while we have these variants on the horizon, people need to step up and get the vaccine, number one. And number two, continue all those non-pharmacologic interventions with masking, with maintaining physical distancing, with avoiding those high-risk situations where they're crowded together and aren't able to maintain the distancing. These things are crucially important right now. If we all do this together, we're going to get through it, and we're going to be in a much, much better place here later this summer and into the fall.
That's a great segue into our next guest. Sarah Morgan's going to be joining us in just a minute. But I want to thank you, Dr. Rupp, for sharing your time and expertise and all that you are putting in to this and making sure that people stay safe and well.
Absolutely my pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
You betcha. Okay, for folks wanting more information on today's program, you can go to any one of these websites, cdc.gov, dhhs.ne.gov, or nebraskamed.com, and there are phone numbers there for you too. As promised, Sarah Morgan is here. Again, Sarah is an administrator with the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services Division of Public Health. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me, Kathy.
Hey, I want to start, what percentage of Americans have been fully vaccinated?
Well, I just checked the numbers this morning, and thankfully CDC has a really good data tracker that's available for people to look at. But as of this morning, 17.9% of Americans that are age 18 or older have been fully vaccinated.
Wow, okay, and what about those, Sarah, who've received one dose?
So that's a little more. So 33% of Americans that are in that same age range have gotten at least one dose.
Okay, and so Nebraska compares how to those figures?
We're actually doing, we're right on track and a little better, which I'm really happy to say. So again, check this morning at DHHS. We do have a dashboard that's available for the public to look at. There's a lot of different metrics that you can see as far as our effort. But as of this morning, we're at 19.1% of Nebraskans that are fully vaccinated. and 36% who have received at least one dose. So we're slightly higher than the national average, I'm happy to say.
Well, and at the rate we're going, we could actually reach herd immunity by late July. Now I want to put a graphic up for our viewers. And Sarah, as I'm doing that, remind us again, what is herd immunity?
Sure. So herd immunity is the phrase that we use to describe when a large enough portion of the population is immune to the virus so that it really can't be spread easily from person to person. And that threshold can vary. For COVID-19, it's actually estimated at 70 to 90%, though, of course, those figures are really based on modeling as opposed to actual data because we're really new into this overall vaccination effort. And one thing I point out when I talk about this is that 70 to 90% seems like a really large spread, and it is a bit bigger than we'd like, but that's because we've got different products that we're looking at. Those products have differing levels of effectiveness against the virus. They had different clinical trials that they were tested in. And of course, now we have these variant strains that can make an impact on herd immunity.
Okay, so given where we are and what you know, and nobody has a crystal ball, but how likely do you think, if we did everything that we were supposed to, how likely is it that we would get to what that graph is indicating?
I definitely think that it's in reach. And as you say, if we do everything we're supposed to, I think we definitely can get there. But I do feel like it's important to point out that the limitation to us being fully protected is not how quickly we get people vaccinated or how much supply we have, but it's really the level of hesitancy in the community. And so getting to that herd immunity really does require everybody who can get vaccinated to get vaccinated. So, having people be hesitant or choose to wait for whatever reason is really just going to keep us in this pandemic longer. We really just need folks to register, sign up to get vaccinated, and then when it's your turn, make that appointment and go get the shot.
Sarah, what have you seen or even heard in the community in terms of reluctance? What would be the number one reason people wouldn't go and get this done?
I always say that I think people who have hesitancy around this vaccine have some, I think, really legitimate reasons for it. Many of the concerns have to do with the fact that it's a new product that has not been around very long. Some folks are concerned because the product seems to have been rushed to market in a really quick way. And I think on the outside looking in, as most of us are, how vaccines are developed is not something that the average person really has any visibility into or knowledge of. So I understand where that could raise some concerns or make people just a little hesitant. So what I recommend is that people really reach out to your healthcare provider and have a conversation so that you can understand or at least have your questions answered about why, how it is that we got to this place so quickly, because there are really legitimate reasons and ways that we got the vaccine developed so quickly. And I think a trusted healthcare provider can really explain that to people's satisfaction. I would also mention that, in Nebraska, we have over 700,000 vaccines that have been administered so far, and very few reported serious side effects. So I think our experience to date will hopefully put some people's concerns at ease as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about experience, specifically yours in terms of, we keep hearing this ramped up. When you hear that, people think, oh, we're doing great. But those of you behind the scenes, right, like Sarah Morgan, how are you doing in terms of managing something of this magnitude?
Well, it certainly is unprecedented and takes a team effort. So I am fortunate enough to be able to talk about these efforts, but there's a whole group of people behind the scenes that really help make this work. And that's not just at DHHS in the area where I work, but it also is at the local level. We really rely a lot on our local health departments. They're crucial at executing vaccination clinics in local communities. So it's that team effort. And I think, as we got started with this, we learned how to work together in new ways and figured out sort of how to communicate so that everyone's on the same page, and really has positioned us well so that in these last few weeks, when we've seen the vaccine supply increase. Right now, we're getting approximately 46,000 doses into the state each week. That's just what comes in to the state that we have some control over. And in addition to that, there is product coming in through federal programs like our retail pharmacy program and our program that serves federally qualified health centers. So lots more vaccine product coming into the state these last few weeks than what we had before. And that's really, that teamwork behind the scenes that we had going on initially has really positioned us well to be able to ramp those efforts up and manage that product, continue getting it administered as quickly as possible when it comes into the state, and start moving through these phases pretty quickly.
So you think we really do have what it takes, and maybe more importantly, who we need to meet the demand right now?
Certainly right now, I think that we have a great network of providers that have stepped up and have been working with folks at the local level as well as us at the state level to administer vaccine. We definitely do keep our eye always a few weeks into the future just to see, what happens if the product increases even more. What are we going to do to really get lots more people moved through clinics faster. So definitely looking ahead to where we may need to bring on new providers or add resources to what we're already doing so that we can vaccinate even more people if that becomes a need. But again, at this point, I think we've got a pretty good system. And a couple things I'll just mention in terms of how well we're doing. We were really pleased last week when CDC MMWR, it's a morbidity and mortality weekly report, ranked Nebraska as 5th in the nation for providing vaccine coverage in an equitable way. So essentially, we're making sure that vaccine is available in those areas of the state that have the most socially vulnerable populations. And that's been a real concern of ours from the get-go. So it was very pleasing to us to have that ranking show out the way it did, because it just validates some of the work that we've been doing all along.
Wow, okay, well that and congratulations. That takes us to the timeline then. Let's put that up for our viewers in about a minute or so. Sarah, tell us what we're seeing here.
So this timeline describes the priority populations that are in each of the phases. So that column sort of on the left really does tell you which folks are in which phase. And then moving across to the right, it's got the months where we expected those phases to start. So people will most likely be familiar with that we're currently in phase 2A, which is people aged 50 to 64 years old. And the timeline originally had us starting this at the beginning of April, but we are a couple weeks ahead of that. We've been moving through phases more quickly, so we've actually gotten into 2A sooner than we expected.
Okay, all right, and remind us please how folks register.
Yeah, thank you, because again, that's key for us getting out of this pandemic. People can go to vaccinate.ne.gov, so the website's there on the screen. Please do click that link and walk through that questionnaire to get your name on the list to register.
All right, and then folks who don't necessarily go online, look at websites and so forth, there are phone numbers, and we're going to put those up now for our viewers. Talk about the importance there.
Absolutely. We definitely recognize that not everybody has access to technology or is familiar with technology, or perhaps language is not their the English language isn't there first, and so working through that questionnaire may be difficult. So these phone numbers are available for anybody who would like to call in, talk to a human. They will help you get registered and signed up so that you can be on the list to get an appointment for a vaccine as soon as your turn comes up.
Okay. And for the many conversations you've had, the interviews you've done, I can't even imagine the questions that have been tossed your direction. Sarah, for our viewers, is there one question that really sticks out in your mind, maybe being the most commonly asked, or maybe took you aback and you had to do a little homework? Would you mind sharing that question with us and the answer?
You know, I think throughout this whole effort, the most common question really has been, when is it going to be my turn to get vaccinated? Because, you know, the supply was so limited in the beginning, and we had these prioritization phases set out. But as with anything of this size and with an ever-changing environment, things do change, and it's difficult to consistently communicate in a real clear way when the situation changes as frequently as it does. So we just all along the way have had people asking, you know, when's it going to be me? I'm X age, or I have this health condition, or this is my occupation. When's my turn to get vaccinated? And fortunately, we're far enough through those phases at this point that I think that answer is hopefully that question is answered for most people. But again, people should register, do vaccinate.ne.gov, get on the list, because if we're ready to serve your particular group of folks earlier than we had expected, then you're set up and ready to go.
Thank you, Sarah Morgan, joining us. Dr. Mark Rupp earlier. Ramped up vaccination efforts. Folks wanting more information can go to one of these websites. You see those on your screen, and we also have phone numbers to accompany those. I want to thank Sarah and Dr. Rupp and our students who are working so hard behind the scenes. As we close, a look at scenes from Indian Cave State Park as seen through the lens of Cade Matuzatki, a senior at UNO. Thank you all for watching. We will see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
than 20 years, only one program has addressed topics that matter to viewers. Only one program delivers the information that Nebraskans need to live the good life. I'm Kathy Wyatt. Join my guests and me as we discuss those issues every week on a program we call Consider This.